Hello, and welcome to Video Game Hangover, the podcast for gamers who overindulge. Each week on VGH, we'll discuss the games that have been keeping us up late and break down a gaming-related topic. Except for this week. On this installment of the podcast, we're talking with big-time indie filmmaker Rob McCallum, writer and director of the upcoming documentary, The NES Club. I'm Randy Dickinson, and I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
I'm Paul Sandu in Dallas, Texas. Recently, Randy, DJ, and I had that opportunity to speak with Rob about the NES Club, some impossible-to-find Nintendo games, and the cultural impact of the Nintendo Entertainment System, and more. So, without further ado, let's roll the interview.
All right, so, hey, this is Randy. We are joined this week by Paul. Say hi, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Paul. And DJ, of course.
Hello.
And with us on this episode is Rob McCallum, the writer and director of the NES Club. Hello, Rob.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So let's tell everybody who's listening to the show who you are, where are you from, why are you on our show?
I don't know, those are all really interesting questions, the ones that usually stump me. So as you so kindly introduced, my name is Rob McCallum. I currently live in an undisclosed location in Las Vegas. I originally hail from Canada, and I am fortunate enough to be on your show because I am in the process of finishing a film, a feature-length documentary called The NES Club, which kind of talks about everything Nintendo in the NES era, but mainly follows one guy around as he takes 30 days to try and amass an entire NES library with no online purchases.
Well, that's awesome. That is quite a feat. What was the inspiration for wanting to amass all of those? Was it just sort of collector's instinct, or was there some greater mission there?
It's pretty much a collector's instinct. Like, you collect to kind of finish it off. You know, everybody that collects kind of says, this is what I'm into, and if only I had this piece or only had this piece, so what is the kind of end? And it's almost kind of, you know, there is no end for any real collector. They always find another way to go out there. And even within the parameters that we set up for Jay, who's the character, more or less, that we follow around for the 30 days, and my best friend of 30 years, we set up that he was only going to get the North American retail release NES game. So that takes out of the equation stuff like Nintendo World Championships, Campus College Challenge, Dinosaur Peak, because it was a Blockbuster exclusive and never sold like in retail stores. So if you look at the numbers, it comes down to about 678. We say 700 because it's much easier to market. But that said, you know, Jay's a collector, so he ended up buying some unlicensed games. You know, so there's always something out there that he will continue to do for the sake of collecting. Right,
just keep moving that needle out and
exactly.
Looking for the next thing.
Well,
exactly.
Because once he gets them all, what's left to do?
There's no such thing as getting them all, because even if he were to say you go into a store and you get all 678 in one day, then it's like, okay, well, now I'll go get the PAL carts. And then now we'll go get the variants ones, like Metroid has 2 labels, for example. I'll get that one, and then I'll get the PAL version of that, or I'll get the 3-screw ones, or I'll get the 5-screw carts. And then I'll get the low serial numbers, or I'll get, all the unlicensed stuff. Well, now I got to get the prototypes, because everything actually is, you know, a reproduction if you don't have the prototype, and then the prototype variants.
So then at some point you just go around, go around buying up every single NES game. Like, nobody else can have these anymore. They're all mine.
Exactly, exactly. So I think as collectors, and this has started to happen to me recently as I've got more and more into NES collecting, I've set parameters for my collection and how I'm only going to collect certain things in a certain way. And I think that's how a lot of people go into collecting stuff. It's like, you know what, I like kind of this sports team, so I'm going to get this memorabilia either from the era that I grew up in, or, you know, from their dynasty years, or, you know, video games, I'm going to go after one system, or just the games I loved from this system. And then it kind of just snowballs, like, oh, that's a cool find. I didn't love it, but this is cool to have the opportunity to get it. So that's kind of how that goes.
And then fast forward and you have to build like an extra room on your house and...
Yes, that's always the debate, and I'm married, and my wife is pretty flexible and forgiving when it comes to my sprawling collection and how it emerges out of my designated space now and again, but she is quick to remind me that, you know, it can't take over our lives.
Right. So did you know all this stuff about Nintendo games before launching into this campaign to make the movie, or is this stuff you learned over the course of assembling the film?
Well, you
Because there's a lot of detail in the stuff you just said.
Yeah, you learn something every day. I mean, from a collector's mentality, everything that I just mentioned is stuff that I'm aware of, like the variants, the chases, the divisions, the PAL versus the NTSC. That stuff, I mean, coming from a movie world, that's all kind of second nature, first and foremost. Nintendo stuff, what really just that I learned and got educated on was the library itself. I mean, we all grow up and we know the Contras, the Castlevanias, the Mega Mans, of course, the Marios and the Zeldas, and all like, what we would call AAA titles from back then. But then it's all like the in between stuff that's either like super common, like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, that you don't really think of. It's like, oh yeah, you maybe kind of recognize the label. And then the stuff that's like super expensive, like, I don't know, Nabunga's Ambition too. It's like, man, I'd never even heard of that game. How is that possible? Well, that's because, it was released whenever, and look at the game. Nobody would want to buy this, So I got educated on exactly the specifics of the library, and going to like about, I don't know, 50 to 100 stores in a short period, what the games reasonably should go for. So there was a lot of education on specifics in the collectible market. But Nintendo themselves and the NES history is something that's always been a part of me, and I think a part of us in some way, even if it's just the myth of Nintendo that permeates us all as game fans. We all get what Nintendo is. So when someone says, all the Power Glove, we instantly know it. But a lot of us don't remember having to set up the sensors on the TV to absorb the sound waves that came out of the glove. That kind of stuff.
Wow. So let's talk about the road trip a bit. How did you decide on the routing for the trip and the shops you were going to hit? What was the planning session like for that to determine how you were going to assemble this massive collection?
Yeah, I want to know if you had some kind of strategy for just like which games you wanted to target, or which games might be the most difficult to pick up, and if that factored into your journey.
Sure. When it comes to the game stuff, because Jay's doing the whole collection, I left everything up to him. I mean, it's his money that he used to buy the game, so he was kind of like the contestant, and I was like the host of the game show, saying, okay, so here's the deal. Here's the challenge. You have 30 days to do this. That said, I set up the whole route. I said, so, logistically, because, we had myself, plus Jay, plus 4 other filmmakers, capturing Jay's journey. There was just some logistics things, traveling around in a minivan, going from city to city. You had to stop and get gas, and we knew how far we could go, 2 to 3 hours here. We could probably hit 2 or 3 stores before we had to hit the road again and go to the next town. Mm-hmm. So let's see where all the stores are close together. We couldn't really go from like Toronto to Seattle because there's a big chunk of America that has like nothing in it. So we had to really kind of stick to the east side of the country. So we went like Toronto, and then Buffalo, and then Erie, and then Du Bois, PA, and then Pittsburgh, Columbus, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Detroit, and then back to Jay's hometown, which is London, Ontario, where I'm from as well. And we say 30 days, but let's be 100% clear. Jay was working during the entire thing. He had 2 8 or 9 day stretches that he took off as part of his yearly holidays. Wow. So we went around the local town, like our local town first, and hit those stores there. Then he took 8 days off, and then went through the U.S. a little bit. Listen to me sound like a true foreigner. The U.S. Went around that area and hit the store. Then we had to go back, and then while we were back in the hometown, it was like kind of like re-strategize time. It's like, okay, so this is what it was like on the road. Now we get to go on the road again in a week's time. What am I going to do kind of differently? I get to visit my hometown shops one more time. Did I pass anything up the first time I saw them that I regret that I didn't get? And this is the kind of last chance I get to see these again. Mm-hmm. So it's the constant weighing of, am I going to see it again versus the convenience of having it locally and the time and the budget? Because when we're on the road, we will never see that store again. We will never see what those games are that are there. Jay's big thing as far as his strategy to collect, and this is, no big mystery, but it was to get like those top 20 games out of the way, because those are the ones that will weigh on you most. Not only in terms of price, but just the opportunity that you have or don't have to acquire them for the collection.
Yeah. Right.
And the top 20 for everybody that's listening would include stuff like, of course, stadium events, Little Samson, Panic Restaurant, Fire and Ice, Power Blade 2, DuckTales 2, Rescue Rangers 2, Bubble Bobble 2, and so on, and so on, and so on. So it was like when he did get some of those titles, it was like, oh my God, I got one of these. It was like whoosh. It was like equivalent of getting 50 commons out of the way because it was such a big deal, and rightfully so.
Right. Cool. So what? How did you fund this? I mean, obviously you did a Kickstarter, and I imagine to a degree that was production stuff. But I mean, how is Jay assembling kind of the small fortune necessary to pull this off without sort of getting super personal, obviously?
No, I mean, and we've been 100% transparent about funds for the most part. Jay's a regular guy. He works at, now listen carefully, he manages a retail video game store with a big corporate background that shall not be named for legal reasons.
Okay, all right.
In Canada. So the Canadian version of whatever you may all be thinking.
Whatever we're thinking right now, right.
Yes. So, and that's just to protect him, and so they're not associated and all that stuff. So that's all he does. It's not like he's a doctor and makes a percentage for every liposuction surgery he does on somebody. And
well, I imagine that at least made it a little easier to tell him why he was taking off for a couple weeks in the middle of the job.
I mean, his work associates were receptive to it, but at the same time, it was like, you've got to. This is your vacation time, so we can't deny it to you, and just remember This is your career. So there's a little bit of that, I think. And of course, this is my opinion, not Jay speaking and all that. So, I mean, so that was cool. And then he just, once we said, okay, we're going to do this movie, he's like, okay, I'm going to start saving. And that was like early May. I'd probably say that's the 14th of May. I premiered a film I just finished called Unearthly, which is like an action adventure, Indiana Jones meets Jurassic Park kind of deal. So I didn't want to do a big effects heavy film again, which is exactly what that was, and it took 2 years. And then he and I were talking, and he's like, okay, let's do a documentary. We had shot a short documentary film before called Fanboys that chronicled collectors and their collections, and I'm like, we got to do something better than this. And he's like, well, let's do something on games. I'm like, that's perfect. Let's do games. And then it just kind of snowballed. Long story short, he only had from May 14th. We launched Kickstarter, I think, the 21st of May. So he had 2 months from May to June, June to July, 3 months to save up for this.
Wow.
Not a lot.
Right.
And then he was depending on his checks to come through as we were doing the 30 days as well. So, but I guess just to break down the budget even more, the money we raised on Kickstarter went towards production exclusively. Again, Jay funded all the games himself. But, if you start costing out what it's like to pay for 6 people just to eat, sleep, and drive, the distance that we did, which is about 10,000 miles so far.
Wow.
It adds up, and that doesn't take into account crew salaries and stuff like that, which, in the independent film world is never quite enough for what these people are willing to, do for you in your dream of making a movie.
So can we talk a bit about gaming documentaries? I think obviously
absolutely.
The Indie Game, the movie, King of Kong, those are kind of the headliners. Those are the first ones that we sort of think of. What is it about gaming? What is it about gamers that you think is so compelling that lends itself to kind of these great movies and these great narratives and characters?
I think that anybody that actively chooses to participate and identify themselves as part of a subculture or says, I am part of this community, is interesting from my perspective as an observer. I'm a gamer, but I will always say kind of first and foremost, I'm a filmmaker. And that's not to be elitist or anything, but that's to say my job is to have an opinion on what the world is, and I show that opinion in the films that I make. So Here's what I think about collectors. As a collector, I'm obviously influenced by it. I just think the idea of collecting is fascinating. I think that the bond between people and object, regardless of what that object is, whether it's marbles, hockey cards, animation cells, or video games, there's an interesting story why somebody feels compelled to acquire these different things that resonates at a different part of their soul or touches them in a different way that only they can truly understand and never fully describe with words. So when two collectors get together and they're like, I like video games, and hey, so I like video games too, they understand the same bond between what they like without actually having to really understand it. And that's what creates that community. So I find that we can associate with one another as collectors, regardless, again, of what you choose to collect. Really interesting that we can do that just on on a meta level.
Right.
And when it comes to video game players, what I think what is interesting about them, I think gamers, they're just they're really interesting. Because there's so many different kinds of people that are gamers. It's not like cut and dry. It's like saying, why do you like humans? Are humans fascinating to you? It's like, well, yeah, but there's so many kinds of humans. There's a bunch of different humans that have different jobs. The same thing goes for gamers. There's competitive gamers. There's gamers that make games. There's gamers that comment on games and through journalism or through podcasts. There's gamers that celebrate games on a different kind of theoretical level. So to talk about people that talk about and experience and interchange with something that's a game, and when I say game, not just like a video game, but the idea of here's an opportunity. This is something that we game. We are participating with this sphere, this entity that allows us to interact with it. And there's an outcome. We're either winners or losers, or we play against one another, or we work together in this environment. The whole idea of what a game is and how people game is super fascinating. Marshall McLuhan, a media theorist from Canada, says the games we play say a lot about us. So to keep it in video games, someone who believes that Call of Duty is the best game ever, it's something that speaks to them more than anything. Mm-hmm. That says something about them. And I'm not picking on the Call of Duty guys. I would say the same thing for World of Warcraft. I say the same thing for NES fans. Right. If you like NES and retro stuff, that says something about you, that you love retro games exclusively. Mm-hmm. Why is that? And that's fascinating. And again, it goes back to the person and what they like and examining that relationship. That's what's interesting. And gamers just seem to have that addictive kindness to it. There's we talk about casual gamers and hardcore gamers, but I think by and large, if you like games, you are motivated to do it. And it's different than people that like to watch movies all the time, because when you game, you're actively pushing stuff. You're an active participant in that game. You're not passively watching it along for the ride. Although some games nowadays, you could argue that you are doing that.
Right.
So that's my little diatribe. Hope that made sense. That got really strange for me too.
No, that's cool. Well, I mean, it dovetails nicely into kind of what we try to do with the podcast, and
okay.
it is a show essentially about devotion, about just feeding an addiction, and I think from a filmmaker's perspective, that would always be interesting, regardless of what that devotion or addiction is.
Yeah, and addiction is thrown around a lot in negative context.
Right, yeah.
I think it's okay to love something and be passionate about something. It's okay to constantly game. And I'm not going to get into it's hand-eye coordination. It's all cognitive training. It's okay to love something. The NES era, and even, before that, and guys that spent tons of years in the arcade, you'll rot your brain out. You're sitting too close to the television. We're always told that what we love to do is wrong for us in some capacity. You know what? Love it, man. Just love it. Sure, there's always extremes of people that take it too far. That's with everything.
Right.
You see guys in sports stadiums getting to fights in the crowds because, somebody did something on the field or the ice or whatever. But you know what? Love it. If you love it, man, go for it. That's all that matters.
Right. Cool. So, well, then why Nintendo? I mean, of all the sort of the game makers in the world and all of the certainly a history of consoles that you could have isolated, what was it about Nintendo and the NES specifically that you and Jay find so compelling?
Well, it's the one console that drew us together. I mean, I've known Jay for 30 years, but when we went to game and hang out and stuff like that, it was always NES, almost exclusively. There's a lot of Genesis and SNES and Atari and stuff and Turbo, but NES, it was always NES first and foremost. And if you look at the industry, especially in North America, the market had crashed, arcades had dwindled, and that started essentially, in '82, Atari and Coleco and television flooded the market with crap, and 3 years later, boom, Nintendo comes. And it's the entertainment system, because heaven forbid it's a video game console, because that should, that can't be stocked, because those things don't sell. All they do is sit on shelves and take up space. And then all of a sudden, boom, we get an arcade experience in the home. And that's kind of like wave one of Nintendo titles, recreating that arcade experience. And that's all that there is on the market, really. There's a little bit of Sega Master System, but by and large, it's Nintendo, and everybody's hooked on it. So everybody has a Nintendo, and it's not fanboy versus that fanboy like it is today. Like, are you a Microsoft guy, or are you a Sony guy?
Right.
Or even in the 16-bit wars, are you a Super guy, or are you a Genesis guy? It just, you know...
Fast forward 30 years. I mean, do you feel like Nintendo still has that kind of influence in modern gaming culture? Are they still the heartbeat of that for you?
Yeah, you know, Nintendo will always be kind of like on the top. They may be the underdog in a lot of gamers' minds right now. That people are saying, "Oh man, if Nintendo just had a hit, it would be so cool to experience that Nintendo, you know, fanboy nostalgia wave again." And they've always got tricks up their sleeves. In fact, it's interesting that you bring that up, because I read an article online today that says Nintendo does not do what the industry likes very well. Meaning that they can't offer what Sony and Microsoft are offering, even though that's really speaking to the masses.
Right.
What they do extremely well is innovate and come up with new things. That's what Nintendo does well. And of course, you look at their history, that does well. Sure, they've had a few questionable products like the Power Glove, like the Virtual Boy. But then for all that stuff, you've got, like, you know, the Wii, you know,
right.
which just makes up for it all. You know, something as, you know, landmark and cataclysmically, you know, shattering as the Wii, you know, erases all doubt about, can Nintendo bring one out of their back pocket at any time? Sure they can. I think they'll always be around. I think that they push so much software out of their two devices. You know, we're talking right now the Wii U and the 3DS or the 2DS at the moment, that they'll always be around because they have a stake in the game. They always will. There's no point for them to kind of go the route of Sega and stop manufacturing something and just go to software only. They make too much money off their first-party titles. That's what sells all their hardware right away. That's where a lot of people are complaining right now in this era. It's like, well, where's the third-party support for Nintendo? Well, you know what? You don't need third-party support. If you're a fan of Nintendo, now is the time to get a Wii U. They just released Wind Waker. They got the new Mario game. They got Donkey Kong. They got Mario Kart. They have like a slew of first-party titles, which is what everybody that likes Nintendo is going to be around for.
Right.
And, you know, I can't speak to how other people game and stuff like that. When I get a console, I probably only have like, I don't know, 10 to 15 games per system, like tops. And I'm not big into the downloading, so I don't count DLC at all. But if I'm a Nintendo fan, I'm good for the lifespan of, you know, a console with what they offer.
As long as there's that drip of core games that have those icons, those licenses in them, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as a Nintendo fan, I mean, can you guys think of what is missing from their first-party titles that it hasn't been announced for the Wii?
Metroid. That's what I was going to say.
Metroid.
That's the one that keeps coming back.
Right.
Okay, so other than Metroid, which gives them something to do in the next 4 years.
Right, precisely, sure. No, yeah, I think...
I'd love a new F-Zero, but...
A new Star Fox would be nice.
Yeah, people are saying, you know, give us some of your old characters and stuff, and I can respect that. That's kind of cool. And people are saying, you know, remake Earthbound and stuff like that, too. So.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'd love to see them come out with some brand new properties, too. Like, Pikmin was really cool last, or a couple generations ago, I guess.
Sure, yeah, I can see that. I mean, it's all about risk and reward right now. I mean, all these game companies are so afraid to, you know, create new IP that it's so much safer just to keep hashing it out because they see the sales of Call of Duty. So if they have anything that's remotely successful, let's just keep churning it out.
Oh, totally.
And, you know, unfortunately, the fans out there answer by buying it every year.
Yeah.
You know, they're the ones that it's unfortunately a sick little cycle. And people ask me about what I'm excited about the next generation of consoles. It's the indie games. You bring up the indie game movie, you know, earlier on, and that film blew me away. You know, I discovered games by watching that. As a guy who unfortunately only has like a PS3 and not an Xbox, I can't play Meat Boy, but I got to play Rayman Legends.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys have played that. There's a lot of cues from Meat Boy in that game.
Oh, yeah,
Let me tell you. It's unforgivingly brutal at times. It's great. Now, I have played Meat Boy on Friends and stuff like that. I just don't own it, but you know, if you guys at all like that, didn't definitely pick up Rayman Legends. That is what I would call of the year a Mario killer for sure. It is an amazing platforming experience that allows you to go back and replay endlessly with a smile on your face from beginning to end.
Cool. Well, and it certainly seems like kind of the definitive version of that Rayman game too, as far as the reviews have gone, is on the Wii U. So that's kind of interesting that the lead console, I guess. The lead experience on that is on the Nintendo console, and it's the others that are kind of cut in half.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm playing it on the PS3. I saw the Wii U version, and you can have, your friend, occupy your helper fairy kind of guy or whatever it is. And it's like, you know what, I just kind of want to play on my own and let it do its thing. Mind you, it's harder to kind of control that while you're playing on PS3 and stuff. So I'm having a ball on the PS3.
So you had mentioned something about, you own relatively few games per console cycle. Is that then... is that typical for you? Is that just something? Is it because of lack of time, or any reason like that?
Yeah, it's mainly time.
Yeah.
I mean, I made it when I was doing my post-grad work at Sheridan College, just outside of Toronto, Ontario. World of Warcraft came out, and it was great. 2005, I got it for Christmas. I was playing it in January 2006. We hadn't got quite back into Turim yet. We were back a week, and it was like that's all I was doing. As you know, the stories of, World of Warcraft addicts isn't all that unfamiliar. And I literally made a choice. I said to myself, wow, I can either play this game forever or get on with my career. But I have to stop cold turkey. It was a serious addiction.
I've had that experience before, so.
Yeah, and I just had to stop. Now, I didn't have a lot of games growing up and stuff like that. Even my NES collection growing up was, 15... maybe 20 games max, not a lot. I'm trying to look at them, but I've acquired a few, so it's hard to tell. I never had a Super. I had 12 Genesis games, mainly NHL, so it's essentially the same game over and over again. I got an Xbox when Halo 2 came out. I didn't have anything. I had a 64, but I never played it that much. I always played Mario Kart and GoldenEye with friends.
Sure.
So I just kind of had it for token's sake. And it's just time. As soon as I made that choice with World of Warcraft, I chose my career. And because I'm a workaholic, I just haven't had time to play. When I play, I have like 3 days, and that's all I do. So like Modern Warfare 2 was my first Call of Duty experience, and I loved the single-player campaign, and I played it all the way through, and lots of multiplayer in 3 days, and then I was done.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I played Uncharted, like binge playing for 2 days, and I mean 2 days, like out of the 48 possible hours, I played for like 40. Just done. So you talk about addictive personality, I get it. But
right, sure.
I call it time management. If I'm going to play this game, I'm going to play it now, and it's going to be done and out of my system.
Right.
And then that's just the way it's been for me. I just don't have time. So it's just like if I'm going to play, I need to get into it. And that's...
If you've got a little window, you fill it as much as possible with
it's
much gaming.
It's really interesting that you bring this up, because Jay and I were talking about this yesterday. I said, you know what, man? It's okay that I really like retro games. And he goes, what do you mean? I'm like, I wasn't following games for a good, healthy while because I'm making movies and that kind of thing. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I didn't consider myself a gamer at one point because I couldn't keep up with what was coming out. And the reason I couldn't keep up is because I didn't have like 4 or 5 hours to sit down, go through the tutorial, get the story. And then you walk away and then you forget where you are. You talk about stuff on NES, it's pick up, put down. So if I'm exporting something for a client, it's 20 minutes. I can put on Rescue Rangers, get my ass kicked, and go back, and keep working after. It's pick up. It's much more of a casual nature. So that's kind of why I prefer a lot of the older games, and that's probably why I'm playing a lot more games now. My hours per week have definitely gone up, but they're just in short little spurts.
Right.
The only game I've probably played extensively lately was XCOM for PS3, and then just Rayman a little bit. But it's all been NES stuff, to be honest.
Cool. I think that's something certainly worth talking about. I think the mindset of a gamer has shifted pretty dramatically from the NES era. I think there is a game of the week mentality now, where it's, so what is this week's new releases, what's on the shop this week, and play through as much of that stuff, and then wait for that next feed, that next Tuesday when everything else is refreshed. I remember as a kid, we had, like you said, you'd have 1 or 2 games, you'd have 3 or 4 games, maybe you'd get 1 or 2 for Christmas, and that would hold you. That would hold you for months. You would play the same game forever. I think that's shifted pretty dramatically.
And I think the digital aspect has really helped that shift. I know a lot of gamers talk about not liking digital versions, but dig deep into the library and you'll see that they have digital libraries.
Yeah,
and when you have a digital...
Well, it's keeping those old games alive, too, and for somebody...
In some sense, but there's a lot of people that buy a lot of new games online, too. Like some of the cool stuff out there, like Pac-Man and Galaga and stuff like that. That's been recently released, DLC only, where you can just amass this huge digital library. Like my one buddy, love him to death, but he buys a bunch of games just to have them there in case he wants to play them later. But now he's got like 100 games, and he doesn't really value any of them. I think. Now you talk about getting 1 or 2 games for Christmas. You have to like those games because that's it.
Right.
You sit down and you force yourself. This is your Christmas present, mister, so you will like it. I don't care how hard it is.
And it's ET for the NES, right?
Well, to be honest, that was my experience with Final Fantasy. I got Final Fantasy for Christmas. I ran upstairs, after Christmas morning was done and put it on. I was like, man, this is hard. I don't like this. This is different. This isn't Mario. I don't understand. And then I played something else, and then I came back to it. I'm like, all right, I guess I'll play this because, my birthday's in November, so after Christmas, there's nothing for the rest of the calendar year. I got nothing looking forward to, right? So I'm like, all right, I'll put this in, and it's like, I worked at it, and it's like, oh my God, this was so cool. Then, because I didn't have anything else to go to, I wasn't waiting for that 30-second fulfillment that we have now. And, this Generation X and Generation Y, where we need to be instantly satisfied, or we're turning the channel.
Right.
It's like, all right, I got to give it a chance. And lo and behold, I saved the princess from the castle. It's like, hey, yay, it's just like Mario. And like, we'll build this bridge for you. I'm like, what do you mean? And then I cross it. There's the title screen, like an hour into it. It's like, oh my God, this is wild.
The game starts with rescuing the princess. What a concept.
Exactly. The princess is just the tip of the iceberg. And that's like, wow, that's when games changed for me. That was a big turning point for me.
Cool. One of the things you had mentioned, on your Kickstarter page, was that you were trying to find a way in the movie to convey the importance of gamers gaming together, gaming in I think it says gaming in a common space.
Yes.
Why is that so important to you? Where do you think that has gone? Do you feel like there are modern games or gaming experiences that still capture that?
Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff that captures that is a little bit more on the collecting side, because you get like these expos and these conventions that are a little bit more merchandise driven.
Right.
Sometimes you get like World Championship tournaments and stuff like that. I was just at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo, and sure, they have a large vendor area, but they had the Tetris World Championships. You got Evo here in Las Vegas for tournament style fighting. So you got that kind of thing, that camaraderie where people come together to cheer each other on and share that space and that shared experience, and that becomes tangible because you're interacting with something else that's physically there, and you have a little literal imprint. I think a lot of gaming today is, it's done online, and people say, well, yeah, but now you're connected to the world, but you're just connected to a faceless voice on the other end of a wire where you have nothing to share except for that experience on the screen. And there's nothing more vacuumous than playing something that was fun online, like XCOM or even World of Warcraft or Call of Duty, and it's like, okay, see you later, click.
Yeah.
And then it's just silence. That's disturbing and frightening. That chills you to the bone, man. It's like, oh my God, it's just done. It's not like, okay, the night's over, and you think about it as you're driving home, because even the drive home is part of that experience because you took the effort to go somewhere. It's part of the journey, that Odyssey story, that literal road story.
Right.
Now it's like, click, done, over, cut off, executed, done, guillotine, no more contact to humans, by myself, isolation, where's the wire, I gotta plug in, where's my cell phone, oh, people on Facebook.
Yeah, exactly, we can just move on to the next stimulus.
Please respond. Yeah, and it's just like, man, it's really advantageous that we can connect and do stuff like this on Skype, but I would have so much more fun if you guys were here, like, around, my coffee table talking about this. You know what I mean? That I can say,
totally.
Here's a great game I found. You'd be like, oh man, that's so awesome. Just, it would feel more real. This kind of talk back and forth on Skype and on multiplayer games is a simulated attempt at what we used to do. It's maybe starting to try and reinvent a new way that we game, but it's a simulated attempt at what we used to do. And as long as it's simulated, like CG and films that we like, it's never quite real, and we always know it's not the same.
Right. It's always going to be a tiny bit hollow, yeah.
Yeah, it may be more convenient, but it's not better.
Right. Listen, it's interesting as you're saying that. I was thinking things like Twitch TV, those are the common space, that sort of streaming gaming community kind of mentality. Sure. The only real places where people get together in big ways are like PAX and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a pretty anomalous experience for a lot of gamers. I don't have a situation in my life where I have gamer friends come over and we all sit on the couch and play couch co-op and stuff like that. And even good luck finding a game that even supports that anymore. So yeah, that's definitely shifted.
Well, one of the cool things that we found going to as many stores as we did is that a lot of the stores get it. You know, I call them mom and pop stores, but they're indie non-corporate stores. We all know kind of what we meant. It's like one guy's kind of vision. And the ones that do it well, you open the door and it's an experience and it makes you want to be there and talk to other people. And a lot of them have couches set up with games and it's like, hey, you want to play a game, you know, while you're chilling or something like that? Or, you know, so you, even within the store, there's an attempt to build a camaraderie and a community.
Right.
And you want to be a part of that, you know, and it's not an elitist thing. It's like, oh, come in, please, we'd love, you know, for you to check out this game. What kind of games do you like? Oh, sure, let's throw that on.
That's awesome.
You know,
and then all of a sudden have something in common with those folks because you're there kind of on the same mission.
Yeah, and a lot of stores in Vegas here, they're divided. They're not just game stores, but they play like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic and stuff. Again, people are playing together in a shared space that becomes familial to them. And that's the draw. You know, they're playing it. Imagine trying to play Magic online. You know, it just doesn't work. I don't know if you guys play cards and stuff. I've never played it, but I can't imagine those kids sitting around with digital versions of their cards on a digital table playing them.
Didn't Sony attempt to make something like that?
They do play in front of a camera? Magic Online every year, and it's funny. There's probably a group of kids out there who've never played the physical version, and they just hop on and play this online. And
I love it.
I wonder if they can even imagine what it's like. Yeah.
If that's the case, then it's only uphill for them as they play the physical, in my opinion. You know, I mean, it's online's great, but it's not. People are afraid to make the effort because everything comes so easily to them nowadays. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of ultimately what Jay's journey is about. Anybody can sit there and click on eBay and buy stuff. You know, buyers be warned. Hint. They can do that in a massive collection. And we shot a section of the film. I'm like, all right, Jay, so show me what it would be like to buy a collection on eBay. He's like, okay. Type, NES lot. Oh, here's some with a couple games. Price is a little high. All right, type. And it's as boring and as monotone as I'm trying to indicate with my voice.
Or, you know, you can just wait because every couple months somebody will post like their 800 game collection. You just click a button and you're done.
Sure, but it's like, did you earn it? And this goes back to just amassing a digital library of games that you have no connection with because there's no value to it. You know, it's like you don't appreciate. There's no sense of appreciation and earning it because it was so easy to acquire that you didn't kind of, you know, bleed and blood, sweat, and tears and put all your eggs in a basket, and it wasn't.
Or live in a van for a month, right?
Exactly. So, I don't know. I love the technology out there as a filmmaker that we have today, but there's nothing better than doing stuff with people.
Right.
And that'll never be beat.
So the no online purchases, that was one of the rules you had set up, and Jay had set up for the road trip. Was that a conscientious choice just because it would not be interesting filmmaking, or was there something more to it than that?
Well, it was the fact that everybody said, well, why don't you just go online and buy it?
Right, exactly. Because that's not a very good movie.
Yeah, exactly. So it was like, okay, we'll get rid of that. And then it was like, well, you know, what if we get down to the last 5 and we can't find them anywhere? It's like, well, you know what? That's the way it used to be. So even in concept, we tried to bring like a retro mentality of what it was like in the NES era, that if you wanted these games, you had to go out and find them.
Right.
You know, sure, you could go to a Toys R Us back in the day, and chances are they'd have what, you know, was being released. I don't remember if it was like every Tuesday was a new game like it is now, but, you know, I just remember walls of their aisles being covered in the tickets and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, those tickets.
So it's, you know, but if you wanted it, you had to get out, you had to go to the store, you had to, you know, take the ticket, bring it to the booth, they'd give you the game, you'd go, like, there's a story there, there's little events and little things stop you from getting there. You're so excited to get Mario 3, traffic sucks, too bad you gotta wait, you know, how are you gonna get around it maybe? You know what I mean? Like, and there was lots of stuff that happened unexpected. You know, sure, we're talking about going from point A to point B over and over again, but there was lots of stuff that happened. And Murphy's Law, you know, will say that it won't be the same thing every time, and sure enough, you know, stuff happened to us. Like, we ran out of gas at one point, which was always fun in Texas.
Right, exactly.
Trying to get home. So, fortunately, there was a gas station half a mile down, and we were able to coast to the feeder road and get out and push the van. But that was a fun experience. They were all like, "Oh my God, we're running out of gas." And I'm just sitting there loving life, just smiling ear to ear, just loving it. Because you know what? You can't write that. You know, we couldn't get the equipment because it was all packed away. But it's like, you can't write that. You know, that's great. That's absolutely great.
And worst case scenario, you're buying something on eBay. What happens? You lose internet connection for a minute, and right.
Well, I can think of one other worst thing when you try to buy stuff on eBay. But yeah, you lose internet connection and all of that.
Well, I think what's interesting about it, too, is that it validates that there are still mom-and-pop shops. I think we get jaded into thinking that, there are no independent video game stores, or there are no independent comic book shops or record stores even anymore. And your road trip proves that those things still exist.
Yeah, and they exist in big ways. We went to several shopping malls, man, where there was a GameStop, and then literally across the aisle or 2 doors down on the same side, a retro shop. And it was amazing to see that kind of mentality in a shopping mall.
That showdown, that's awesome.
And it's like, you know what? Nobody's in the GameStop with a smile on their face. People walk into the retro shop, just like they beam with energy, like, oh my God, this is so cool. I remember this. Oh, what's that? They want to discover, they want to explore that world. They have that experience. You walk into a GameStop, you've walked into, before you realize it, I don't know if have you guys been to San Francisco?
Oh, sure.
DJ lives near San Francisco.
Have you been to Hollywood, Florida?
No.
Okay, so I guarantee you'll know what a GameStop looks like in Hollywood, Florida, because you've been in one GameStop in your entire life.
Oh, sure.
They all look the same. They're always the same experience. There's nothing new. You'll never get anything that it's, simulacrum, recycled corporate space. You talk about fun. Go to all the different mom and pop shops around the country. It's a different experience every time. And it's so cool to see that personality of that owner and that ownership shine on the shelves.
Cool. Can you tell us about your interaction with Nintendo, if any? Have you heard from them? Are they aware of the movie that you and Jay are making? I mean, what are you getting from that side of the project?
They're very much aware of the movie.
Oh, really? Cool.
We've had discussions back and forth, both Nintendo of America and Nintendo of Canada. Unfortunately, I can't really divulge anything at this time,
right? As
things are still getting hashed out. There was
let's not ruin the ending either. I mean, obviously.
Yeah. There's a lot of talk early on. Right now, it's Q4, so things are a little bit tighter for them as they're prepping for holiday and stuff like that. But there is definitely communication ongoing back and forth on a almost weekly basis.
Cool. Any big discoveries during the course of your road trip? Is there maybe a game that you discovered that you didn't know existed before that you kind of love, or anything like that was a big surprise to you as you set out on this?
I think it was just, again, understanding the library and then discovering some of the stuff. Now, I'm a huge DuckTales fan, and I didn't know that they made a sequel to DuckTales on the NES, or Rescue Rangers, for that matter.
That was actually the first time I heard of it when you mentioned it.
Yeah, me too.
A while ago.
Yeah, so, and I'm a huge DuckTales fan. I bought the digital version for PS3. I bought the physical case, which just has the collector's pin in it.
Oh, wow.
I have a box copy of DuckTales 1. I now have a copy of DuckTales 2. So just to discover that those Capcom titles that were so amazing had sequels to them was incredible to me. It's like, oh my God, how did I not know this?
Especially knowing Capcom's history at this point.
Yeah, and it's like, jeez, this is incredible. Now I'm excited. So it sucked because, long story short, Jay came across both Rescue Rangers 2 and DuckTales 2. I had to let him buy those first before I could buy them, because my interest is first and foremost into the film,
right?
And then me in second. So it was like, God, I got to find these games now. So now I'm on the hunt. So that was probably the big revelation for me, and just knowing again about the titles that didn't exist out there.
Right.
That was cool.
That's excellent. I think we're kind of in the home stretch here. DJ Paul, is there anything else you guys wanted to ask Rob about?
I'm sure you guys are dying to know about my Facebook page and how people can follow along with the progress of the film as we march towards premieres.
We are. Absolutely. Tell us about that.
Well, since you asked, our Facebook page is just www.facebook.com/the-NES Club. Pretty simple. Title of the movie, facebook.com/the-NES Club. Go there. We have a few weekly contests. We just gave away a glossy version of one of our posters for somebody correctly guessing what game I have in my signed Nintendo by all the participants on the film. It was Daydreamin' Davy, but I had something like 5,000 people look at it and probably about 300 comments between the different feeds that I had going. So that was a fun 24 hours responding
That's awesome.
to people. Yeah,
and somebody got it.
Somebody eventually got it. Yeah, somebody
Nice.
got it. Mason Kramer, who's the world record holder on Super Mario World, correctly guessed it. So, and that was a cool interview on its own. So yeah, if you go to facebook.com/the NES Club, you'll be able to, cool contests like that. You'll see updates from us. You'll see stills from the editing process as we post. And our Twitter account, I believe, is linked to it as well. It's just at the NES Club or at Pyre Productions, which is my production company, PYRE Productions. I have a lot of stuff going on there too. But that's the best way to keep in touch. And reach out, man. Jay and I are super friendly. If you have a question about the film, as long as it's not like, did you get all the games? We can't give away the ending.
Right.
What did you pay for this game? We're not telling you what we paid for. Because I guess it's the other big thing that you guys never really touched on. You talked about budget a bit, but in the movie, we are striving not to show negotiation or what Jay pays, or talk about how much he has.
Oh, cool.
You're not going to have any interesting stats on like the number one most expensive game or the most difficult to obtain and stuff like that?
We could talk about that in that context, but I don't want to put a price value on games because I don't, as a collector, want to drive up the value of some of these games, but I'm not interested in making it about the value of the games. I want to make it about the games themselves and why the game is good, not why the game is expensive. Unless it's like, okay, stadium events, then we'll talk about like the lore of it.
Sure.
But it's just, I don't want it to be like, oh, this game's $200, but Jay got it for, $120. And now the retailer's on the hook. Hey, I saw in this movie, you sold this game for $120. And then it becomes about how much Jay can save, and it becomes like an American Pickers, Pawn Stars, numbers game. Sure. And I want to make it about the NES and collecting and a road trip with my best buddy over 30 days and the fun that we had and the fun that you guys will have when you watch it.
Well, I mean,
that's great. That's a really good philosophy to bring along.
Absolutely. The inevitable question there is is it worth it too? And that's the other thing that probably is not best gotten into. Is it's worth it to everybody who's into it.
Sure.
And you kind of apply your own value to it.
We talk a little bit about the inverse relationship of a quality of game to the price that it is, and for the most part, it's the crappier the game, the more expensive it is. Like stadium events, right? I mean, that's world-class track meet, and it's horrible. It's a horrible game. There are a few gems, like, DuckTales 2 plays exactly like DuckTales 1, and the price on that, okay, it's high, but it's like, great, that's cool. You can justify that if you're a DuckTales fan or trying to, get the whole collection. At least you're not getting burned on something that's horrible. Something like Snow Brothers is, pretty pricey too, but that's a fun game. So at least it's good games with good value, but then you get like a bunch of games that are just horrible, and they're only good, or they're only expensive because, short production run and nobody bought them.
They're impossible to find.
Exactly. So, yeah, we talk about that a little bit at some point. I can't say if all that gets in the film, but that's stuff we can totally always talk about on panels and other situations.
All right. Well, I guess the big question before we wrap it up then is when and where will we be able to see the movie?
Well, that's a really good question that I wish I had more of an answer for. We're working diligently on post. If you look at all the stuff online, it'll say 2015. I'll just say right now, 2015 is kind of like our backup, if, the world collapses or something like that, or some unfortunate eBay incident.
Or somebody shuts down the government, or...
Yeah. Somebody told me that happened. I didn't notice.
Right.
They don't have to worry about that up in Canada.
Yeah, well, I live in Vegas now, so I'm somewhat aware, although I can't vote being a Canadian citizen, so it really doesn't matter to me, I guess.
I feel your pain.
Ignorance is bliss! I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this show, but I would quote a bunch from Team America, so,
You're okay, you can swear.
America! Fuck yeah! I love it. Shut down the government, nobody cares! We're hoping to have this done for, next year.
Excellent.
That'll be done, 2014 fourth quarter, as the games used to be represented for when their release date was. Fourth quarter 2014. So, and then we hope to have it at different conventions and expos. So when you attend, make sure that you check out for that in the listings.
Oh, cool.
We hope to maybe do an Indiegogo campaign once the film is finished, so that if you did want to purchase one, then that's like a nice legal way to do it versus, out of the back of a van somewhere. Mm-hmm. And then we're actually getting more and more perks thrown at our way by our generous, people that are being interviewed and participants on the film, like Mark Erickson, who did the artwork for Tengen Tetris and Mega Man 2, amongst many others. we're talking to him about possibly doing artwork for our film and one-offs and stuff like that, which might be available on Indiegogo.com. So
I saw a couple of those prints it looked like you had on your Facebook. So you actually have been in contact with the guy.
Yeah, I met him at the Portland Retro Gaming Expo, and we interviewed him for the film. He really likes what we're trying to do. Very humble guy. He didn't quite understand why I was so excited to meet him and shake his hand as I was fanboying all over him. But then I secured those 2 prints, which he still sells from his website, markerickson.com. So if you guys are keen to get a Tengen Tetris, a Mega Man 2, or like an Afterburner, or a G-Lock, or Guerrilla War, or feel free to visit that site. It's cool to have those paintings signed to me, and now I got a Mega Man 2 signed, and I picked up a Tengen Tetris like in mint condition for him to sign next time I see him. So
oh wow,
yeah. So it's just, and we got a Twin Galaxies card, and Walter Day's working with us to give us special like gold foil versions for when the film comes out for people that want to pay a few extra bucks to have that.
Excellent.
Yeah. So. Cool. We're just really fortunate by everything that's come across. And I mean, I can't say it enough, guys. I really appreciate you reaching out to me and asking me these questions and, thinking so much of the film that you want to talk to me about it. It's a really big deal to us that people care in the amount that they have. It's, to me, and until the film's done, it's just going to be a movie that I care about, and I hope it makes a difference in somebody's life some way. But the constant attention that we're getting from folks like yourself is just really overwhelming, and we really appreciate it.
Cool. Well, we certainly appreciate you being on the show. As soon as we found you on, I think it was on Twitter we first connected, and
sure.
we missed the Kickstarter, unfortunately, but we read the premise of the movie and found you on Facebook. Like, we have to talk to this guy. We have to get him on the show, and you were super open to it. So Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it. I love the conversation. Tell us again what that Facebook page was, Rob.
It's facebook.com/the NES Club, and we're also on Twitter at the NES Club.
Excellent. Cool. We'll have links to anyone listening, so you can go check those out.
Right. All right. Well, thanks again, and good night.
Thank you.
And we're back. We hope you enjoyed that interview. Big thanks to Rob for taking time out of his schedule to chat with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you'd like to find out more about his movie, The NES Club, you can follow him on Twitter at Pyre Productions. That's Pyre Productions. And like him on Facebook at facebook.com/the NES Club. We'll put links to both of those pages in the show notes. If you have questions or comments for us, we are VG Hangover on Twitter and Facebook as always, or just head to our blog at vghangover.com and let us know what's on your mind. So this is Randy Dickinson.
This is Paul Sandu.
Thanks for listening to Video Game Hangover.
Bye-bye.
Good night. You've been listening to Video Game Hangover. Tweet your gaming questions to VG Hangover on Twitter, or you can always interact with us at vghangover.com. We'll feature the best stuff on a future episode. This week's music is by Ricky Hanmong from the soundtrack to the Curve Studios games Stealth Bastard and Stealth Inc. You can listen to the entire soundtrack and download a copy for yourself at curvestudios.bandcamp.com. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week.